This is Mr. Zephyr Rankin, and he received his master's degree in library science from Emporia State University in 2022. Is that in Kansas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to college close to that. A certificate in digital accessibility from the Texas Digital Learning Association in 2025, and an instructional design certificate from the International Society for Educational Technology here just this year, 2026. He currently serves as the STEM and Agriculture Librarian at our university, East Texas A&M University. As part of his role here, Zephyr has presented research on library services, digital accessibility, and educational technology at a variety of conferences. I plug you in everything I'm doing. And educational technology at a variety of, and has conducted trainings on accessibility, AI, data privacy, and digital literacy for faculty, staff, and students. So today he's here to present on AI-powered accessibility and language learning. And this is a presentation he actually gave for us at our TESOL Professional Development Day, I think a year ago. And also, did you present at our AI Professional Development Day? Yeah, like I said, if I'm doing something, I want Zephyr on board with it. So welcome and thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to skip this title slide because you've already heard the title. Oh, I was selected on something. Click there. Okay, first things first, if you want to download a text-based version of the presentation, I'm going to leave this QR code up for just a second so everyone has time to scan it. And I will preface this by saying this was originally designed for the TESOL Professional Development Day, so there is a focus on specifically teaching English as a second language in this presentation, but it does also work for general language learning classrooms. Okay. So yeah, I'm Zephyr Rankin. Normally I have to introduce myself, but you have been introduced to me already, but I will point out those links at the bottom. You can email me individually at zephyr.rankin@etamu.edu. And then you can also contact all of our librarians all at once using the form at etamu.edu/askwaters. So first, we're going to cover a really quick overview of accessibility and then a really quick overview of artificial intelligence. These are both topics that can take months to years to master. So obviously, we're not going to talk about them, either one of them, very much in depth, but just an overview so that you know what we're talking about. And then we're going to dive into all of the accessibility tools and their uses that are marketed for language learning classrooms or classrooms in general. A lot of these are more general. Both the use cases and then also overpromises or detriments to look out for. So first, accessibility. What is accessibility? Accessibility ensures that all members of your audience are able to access the information or content that you produce. Essentially, it means that if you have a group of 30 people and you have something that you want them to see, you need to make things accessible to make sure that all 30 of those people are able to access it and not just 20 of them. The heart of accessibility is having options or customizability. If you have any experience with something like universal design for learning, then you would have been familiar with the idea of having multiple points of access for engaging with material, assessment, those sorts of things. And that's important because something that makes a content item accessible to one person might make it inaccessible to another person. My go-to example for this is large text. For someone with low visual acuity, which a lot of people have, larger text is easier to read because the shapes are easier to differentiate even when they're blurry. But for someone with high visual acuity and a low field of vision, someone with tunnel vision, for example, small text is actually much easier to read. Large text, they won't be able to see the entire line at once. So what can accessibility accommodations help with? They can help with vision for people with low vision, hearing, or audio information for people without the ability to hear, navigation, both digital and physical, but we're going to focus on digital, cognition, communication, visualization of text or audio material, and also generally health, but we're not going to cover that at all. And then a few examples. Well, first a note, as an AI workshop, we are going to focus on digital accessibility, not physical accessibility. So things like ramps, seating, that sort of stuff isn't going to be covered at all. But some examples of digital accessibility: readable text. So like I said, larger text for people with low visual acuity, captions and transcripts for people who can't hear, audio descriptions and alt text for people who can't see, summaries of content, low contrast for people who might have some vision that needs lower contrast, like people who get migraines or people who get seizures, or high contrast for people, again, who have low visual acuity and need things to be more clear, heading levels for navigation, and so much more. And now we're going to quickly discuss artificial intelligence. So generally speaking, artificial intelligence is a term that refers to all computer programs that perform tasks typically associated with humans, which means that it is a term that has a very nebulous meaning. There's not really a one specific definition that's like, this is AI and only this is AI, nothing else is AI. So we're going to talk about two very broad types of AI that we can use for accessibility work. The first is analytical AI. It uses a more specific data set. It has more specific use cases. It observes patterns and makes predictions. And then generative AI uses large, complex data sets and general use cases, and usually use data sets in order to create some sort of output. The line between these is blurry. It's not just, it's not two boxes. It's more of a spectrum. But in general, analytical AI is about saying, I've noticed this pattern and this is the sort of thing that I'm gleaning from the pattern. So those medical AI devices that are used to look at an entire data set of just mammograms and say, these are the ones likely to have breast cancer and these are the ones likely not to have breast cancer. It's not actually creating a new mammogram image. It's just saying, this is the pattern that I've recognized. Versus generative AI, which is those like chatbots and LLMs that you are now all familiar with, I'm sure, that are taking those data sets and then processing that information, and then you prompt it, and then it gives you something as an output. And then just my big disclaimer here, AI is not magic. While some generative AI tools mimic human output, they're complex algorithms, not brains, and therefore do not think or process information like humans do. So when you are using AI tools to analyze or create accessible content, always, always, always have it checked by a human. And now we're going to talk about the actual tools. These are the tools we're going to cover: web and document analyzers, chatbots and text generators, image and facial recognition, speech to text, text to speech, AI translators, and AI learning assistants. First use case is web and document analysis. This is really useful in all classrooms. You can use these to create or identify issues with alt text, captions or transcripts, contrast, heading levels, links, and navigation. Most analyzers are at the point now where they are simply alerting you to a missing accommodation. So if your heading levels are incorrect on your document or your web page, then they will just say, this is incorrect. There are some now that can make automatic adaptations. There is, however, an issue of they're not always going to be able to see all of the issues. So one example is contrast. It might not be able to see the color contrast between something that isn't an object on a background. So that image in the top right, if that had text on it, it wouldn't be able to tell what the contrast is between the text and the image because it's just kind of there. It's one item, but it will be able to see the color contrast between the text and the blue background that I have and with the text on the slide. Automatic adaptations are usually using a different AI tool in the background, and we are going to discuss all of those AI tools that it would be using, which means that they are prone to making the mistakes associated with those other types of generation. So we will talk about all of those in a second, starting with text generators. Use cases for text generators, which include chatbots like ChatGPT, but also like just general text generators. They can create summaries of long or complicated documents and summaries of complicated concepts at lower reading levels for students that might have cognitive disabilities. And then they can also assist with communication and tone in a text format. So I've heard cases of neurodivergent students having a fake conversation with an AI bot and saying, can you help me frame this in a way that seems more friendly or more human or something. Now, there is obviously issues with that because what is human to a robot? So you do need to look out for, especially if you're using this for some reason, incorrect or inadequate information. So it could get something completely wrong, or it could just leave out something important. It also can lead to, in the communication case, especially over-reliance on the chatbot. We're going to define that more specifically towards the end of this presentation. You also need to look out for bias in the AI, and in these cases, especially look out for language bias. And again, we'll talk about that later on. And then privacy. Pay attention to what the company actually does with the data that you put into AI. And then depending on what it does with that data, be careful with what you let it access. If something is FERPA protected, even if they say they don't keep your data, you probably shouldn't put it in an AI anyway, just to be safe. Image and video generators. In this case, for a language learning classroom, mostly to generate images or visualizations. So if you're trying to teach someone a language they don't already know and you're giving them sort of like a conversation between two people, having something to show what they might be talking about can help prompt for vocabulary. This is a way you could use that, of just saying, please make a short video or an image that shows this sort of thing that you're having them read about, just to add an extra level of helping with cognition and sorts of things. Again, what to watch out for: inaccuracy, bias, and then the output itself might not be accessible. It might not have alt text on an image, or it might have a video that is low contrast or too dark and people can't actually see. So keep those things in mind. Image and facial recognition has a lot of interesting use cases in language learning specifically, I think. So alt text generation is something that you could do for pretty much any classroom. Same with description of surroundings for those with no or low vision. So active image recognition in something like a smartphone is a way that people who are blind will often go to the grocery store and have an app specifically that scans the shelves at the grocery store to tell them where something is. But in this case, it can also be used for assistance with tone, facial expressions, and gestures. So it can read someone's face as they're speaking and say, this is the emotion that they're outputting. And that can help a lot with cultural differences in language, not just actual language differences. Again, though, you need to watch out for nonsensical or unhelpful alt text. For some reason, alt text generation specifically is one of the most problematic I've seen in terms of generative content. Inaccurate description of situational information, and then privacy issues. Scanning someone's face can lead to a helpful output, but can also be a major privacy concern. Speech to text use cases include captions and transcripts. Some software is even capable of doing multilingual captioning now. So a lot of places you have to set a language that you want your captions in. So right now, if we had the automatic captions on in Zoom, we would select English, but there are software now that if you are speaking in multiple languages or you have speakers that speak different languages, they are capable of captioning in all of those different languages. And that's mostly to do with how it's processing the language and how it is pulling from like its data set when it hears those sounds. It can also help a lot with communication. So if you have someone that you know who is deaf that you're trying to speak to, but you don't know sign language, you can speak into a device and then it can output as text live. Same with the Zoom live captions. It's a very similar technology. And then it can also help with digital navigation. So people with mobility disorders will use speech to text devices to control their computer. So they can just speak to their computer and say, click on the link that says this. Again, similar what to watch out for: inaccuracy, bias, especially language bias in this case, because of something we'll talk about a little bit later with the multilingual and things like that, and then privacy. Text to speech works the same, but backwards. So it takes written text and turns it into speech using an AI voice, basically. In this case, communication would work similarly but differently. So this is a really good way to read information out loud for blind users. Can create things like audio descriptions, textless alternatives, and then can also be used for digital navigation. This is how screen readers work. They read everything on a screen out loud, so that you can use a computer without having to be able to see what would be displayed on the screen. And then text to speech, what to watch out for, mostly inaccuracies, especially with specialized language. So we work in academia, or we are in school for academia. And so we know that there are words that just aren't in the data set, or aren't very, very thoroughly in the data set for some of these voice bots. And then non-English text, especially if it is something that is relying on a dictionary of sorts, it might only be programmed to speak in one language. AI translators, again, can help with communication. Some of these are just text, some are text to speech, and some are speech to text. And they are even working on live sign language interpretation using those same image recognition softwares. This is not a specific type, like text generators are a specific type of AI. This is usually using multiple different kinds of AI and multiple data sets to take one thing and turn it into another thing. Again, what to watch out for, inaccuracies. Usually this technology doesn't really understand slang or nuance. And then obviously privacy. And in language learning specifically, you run the risk of over-reliance, especially if you're using AI translators for communication. It's very easy for someone learning a new language to rely too much on computer generated translation, and then they're not actually learning. And finally, AI learning assistance. Again, this is something that's using a lot of AI technology in the background. A lot of it is text generators and chatbots, but they are being used to set up personalized learning strategies and timelines for students. And then they're also being used for feedback. So they can make instant feedback in a way that a professor or a teacher never could. And they do it in a way that can be personalized or impersonal, depending on how you set it up. And so impersonal feedback might really work well for especially people learning a second language, because sometimes you get this connection with your teacher or your professor and you don't want to disappoint them. And so that impersonal feedback from a computer can be really helpful for students who feel that emotional impact if they feel like they are disappointing their teacher. Otherwise, you can also set it to be very personalized so that it works with the learner and their learning type. What to watch out for, inaccuracies. Cognitive offloading is going to be a huge one here. Again, that's a type of over-reliance, but specifically the kind that means that people aren't thinking and they're not engaging with the material. Privacy, and then they can be either too personal or too impersonal. We have issues now of people getting into sort of parasocial relationships with AI chatbots. And then sometimes when that changes, because it's not a person, it's a bot, they have become so emotionally reliant on those chatbots that they almost feel like that, like they can fall into depression, or they have a negative mental health episode because of the changes in the code. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about privacy first, and then we're going to talk about some of the other detriments that we have sort of brushed over. So the first is privacy is at risk. Accessibility has been used as a smokescreen for increased surveillance. This first example, Autism in the Making of Emotion AI, was a facial recognition software that was marketed as a way to help autistic and generally neurodivergent, but primarily autistic people recognize facial expressions and help them learn sort of the cultural emotional reaction of people. But it was actually being used to increase government and corporate surveillance of people. And then the other example I have here is a document analyzer that works for web pages. It's called Accessibility, and it's an extension that you can put on a website that allows people to change the color contrast, turn on screen reader mode, change a few other things to make the website more accessible. I think you can like take off images in order to reduce cognitive load, things like that. But in a browser that has a tracker blocker installed as an extension, the accessibility widget disappears because it had integrated Facebook trackers on it. And privacy is a right. So this is why you should care about that. And it is protected by law. So people deserve to make informed decisions about what happens with their personal data. And accessibility shouldn't come at the cost of personally identifying information. And this is mostly important for educators because we are held to FERPA, but it's also important for disability because of things like HIPAA laws and medical privacy. Inaccuracies and lack of context. AI is prone to mistakes because it doesn't know anything. It just replicates patterns. AI cannot have experience with things like context, customs, and culture. And so it's not going to, it can replicate patterns to an extent. And so it can kind of replicate those things, but it's not going to ever understand them. And it's not going to be able to easily adjust for them. And then for language bias and language inaccuracies, it has been estimated that most Gen AI models have only been trained on about 10% of non-English languages, and they are known to prioritize English both in their input and their output. A lot of current Gen AI chatbots only process language in English, and then they have, if they say they support other languages, they usually have a translator thrown on top of them that translates to English, then it processes your input in English, makes output in English, and then translates it back into whatever language you're using. Bias is also important here, again, because of the way that it recognizes and replicates patterns. Systemic bias is in the data set. There's no way to really avoid it. We have tried to avoid it. It's not working. Speech to text also struggles with disordered speech and certain accents. AI translators work best with popular languages. So you'll see something like English to Spanish translation is usually about 70% correct, whereas English to Maori translation is going to be a lot worse. And then text to speech struggles to adequately replicate tones and sounds not present in English, because again, a lot of these voice bots are given English tones in order to teach them how sounds work. And then finally, over-reliance. Students new to a language will not instinctively recognize inaccuracies and bias in the output. So something like a term that is maybe like a racial slur in a language might be in an output, but they don't know that it's a slur or an inappropriate term or something because they're not familiar with the language. And so they don't have the background necessary to recognize it. There is a big problem with linguistic flattening. With these bots, students new to English in TESOL context will rely on LLMs like things like Grammarly that use a very specific version of standardized American English. And they're developing what people are kind of colloquially calling a bot accent. So as if you're going into TESOL, that's something to really keep in mind. And then cognitive offloading. Consistent AI use has been shown to decrease critical thinking and creativity. My last thing to talk about is also over promises. So the companies that create these AI tools, because they're almost always created by companies, are profit motivated. They want your money. They don't really care all that much about education. They want you to think their product is going to change the world because that means your school is going to purchase it. They want to sell schools on the idea that AI is so good at education that it can eventually replace teachers. Watch out for big promises, especially those that can't be traced back to good research. A lot of the research right now is being funded by the AI companies that are trying to get you to purchase their product, and so it's not going to be good at robust research. And they want to sell you on the idea of helping teachers with limited resources. The solution sometimes is AI, but often isn't AI. It's you need more resources. I have 3 slides of references and resources for you. I'm going to skip them because they are in that document that I linked at the beginning, and there's my email if you need it.
Thank you.